Fingers to Fight. This is Global Great Awakenings on GreatAwakeningsTV.com. We are joined once again by the great Mike. It is honorable and great to have you on with us again, especially now, given that we are seeing so much happening in the Middle East with the invasion of Lebanon. A lot of headlines going forth. Let me play this quick video of the news introduction before we launch in, just to give us some background. Let me play it right here. This is the opening news, in case people haven't been following it.
Bringing you analysis and insight into the situation unfolding in the Middle East. This is as Israel expands its operations. This is RT International. Thank you for choosing us this hour. Well, Israel has officially declared a, quote, limited operation in southern Lebanon that's aimed at targeting Hezbollah. Now, the Lebanese health ministry says 95 people have been killed and more than 170 wounded. This is an Israeli raid across the country that took place on Monday. It comes as loud explosions have been heard across the capital, Beirut. Lottie has correspondents that are stationed on both fronts of the conflict in Lebanon and in Israel. And earlier, I had the latest update from RT's Middle East Bureau Chief Maria Fanoshna and also RT correspondent Yasin Ekin.
First and foremost, the IDF has confirmed that it has actually started its ground incursion. My colleague Maria will provide further detail in that respect. But based on that statement, we also understand that the incursion is currently limited to a specific scope as well as a specific geography, something that the IDF has been planning for months in preparation for this attack. We understand that the southern territories are now under constant bombardment. Aerial raids as well as artillery fire is currently setting the landscape for that ground incursion. But meanwhile, in the capital, Israeli air raids are also continuing. We have been listening to drones flying over the capital since early morning, and it's been consistent over the course of the past few days. There have been air raids. The suburbs of Dahia, the southern parts of the capital, have also been under fire, and the constant attacks are escalating in one form or the other. We understand over the course of the last 2 days, Israel's targets have not been limited to Hezbollah. They've been targeting other fractions within the group which have no specific affiliation with the organization which the IDF says is in its specific scope and focus of operations moving forward. But we also know that there is video footage emerging on social media suggesting Israel is using white phosphorus in these southern territories. Israel has been accused of using white phosphorus over the course of the past year, especially in civilian and agricultural landscapes throughout the country. And this is alarming because it is banned under international law. And of course, weapons treaties that Israel is not a party to, as well as the ICC, the ICJ, and very similar governing bodies which implement and enforce essentially humanitarian and international laws. But moving forward, there have been statements that have been provided from the group Hezbollah. We understand the Deputy Secretary General, Naim Qassem, issued a statement suggesting that they are ready for a ground incursion if Israel decides to go ahead with it, and they vow to continue their fight and resistance against Israeli aggression. This was Naim Qassem. Let's listen to this.
What we are doing is the minimum as part of our ongoing battle plan. We know that the war could be long and options are open to us. We will confront any scenario and are prepared if the Israeli forces decide to enter on land. The resistance is ready for ground engagement.
The developments just on Monday alone suggests that there's been a great deal of initiative from the Lebanese government as well. We understood in the early hours the government decided to deploy its military again in the southern territories in an attempt to persuade Hezbollah to take a more lenient stance, prevent its attacks. But in response to the prospect of a ground incursion, the Lebanese military withdrew from those territories, stating that any hostilities or any interactions with the Israeli forces will be combatants that are not affiliated with the government or its military. So we do understand that the situation in and of itself is volatile, and it's going to be quite crucial to see how this develops and whether the prospect or the fear of a large-scale war is on the table.
Yes, and I just want to ask, though, in terms of the wider region, has there been any reaction from the players in the Middle East?
There has been some reaction from the Lebanese government, especially with respect to the deployment of its military in the south. We understand that the general stance of the Lebanese government has been that of a neutral stance, but more so a stance in favor of peace and essentially standing against war. That has been the general sentiment. But we've also heard from Jordan's foreign minister, who says that the Arab world wants peace, whereas Israel is interested in furthering its agenda, essentially resulting in a protracted conflict that could bring a great deal of chaos and destruction, not just to Lebanon, not limited to Israel, but across the entire region. This is the foreign minister of Jordan.
The amount of damage that Israeli government has done, 30 years of efforts to convince people that peace is possible, this Israeli government killed it. The amount of dehumanization, hatred, bitterness will take generations to navigate through. So ultimately the question is, we want peace, and we've laid out a plan for peace. Ask any Israeli official, what is their plan for peace? You'll get nothing, because they're only thinking of the first step, we're going to go destroy Gaza, inflame the West Bank, destroy Lebanon, and after that, they have no plan. We have a plan. We have no partner for peace in Israel. There is a partner for peace in the Arab world.
So the developments on other fronts, not just limited to that of Lebanon, suggest that Israel is also carrying out attacks in Syria, targeting specific locations within Iraq, but Yemen as well. So it's not just limited to that of Lebanon or Gaza. The prospect of a regional war is that much more real than it was over the course of the past year. So many leaders have been quite vocal, especially in their condemnation against Israel's approach to dealing with Hezbollah. And the developments over the past few days suggest that the scope of Israel's military operations within the country could not be limited to Hezbollah alone, and that the lives of civilians are also on the line. And Israel does have a track record of disregarding the safety of civilians when it comes to carrying out these campaigns and achieving military success.
Thanks for the update on the ground down Beirut. Let's head over to Israel now and speak to Maria Panoshina. Maria, could you just tell us what we know about this Israeli operation so far? Because it doesn't seem to be particularly clear-cut in terms of not much information being officially confirmed.
Well, a highly anticipated scenario has come true. The IDF has just now confirmed that the Israeli troops have begun limited, localized and targeted raids against Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Israeli Air Force and artillery are supporting the ground forces with precise strikes on military targets in the area. Let's take a listen.
In accordance with the decision of the political echelon a few hours ago, the IDF began limited, localized and targeted ground raids based on precise intelligence against Hezbollah terrorist targets and infrastructure in southern Lebanon. These targets are located in villages close to the border and pose an immediate threat to Israeli communities in northern Israel.
Well, I have to say it didn't come as a surprise at all. There have been multiple signs of a looming ground operation. Israeli tanks were deployed at the border some time ago. New checkpoints appeared all across northern Israel, and military presence was all in all strengthened. Additionally, Israeli troops recently completed several military drills simulating a ground offensive in Lebanon, with the army publicly and openly releasing visuals from the exercises. And during one of the visits to the troops in the IDF's chief of staff basically told the Israeli military that the extensive strikes were part of preparations for a possible invasion, basically confirming it ground operation was coming. Israel had also earlier called up additional reservists for a mission in the north, not Gaza. So the operation was widely anticipated. Some media earlier reported and have suggested that the operation may aim at establishing a security buffer zone in southern Lebanon. As you remember, Israel maintained its military presence in southern Lebanon from 1982 until its withdrawal in 2000. And there has been speculation about the army's willingness to return. Nothing about it in the IDF's official statement about the ground operation.
Maria, I just want to talk about
being probably the fiercest.
You heard in Mash's report there, but can you just tell us what's happening?
A population to get your political aims draw. So clearly, if the Israelis enter
purposeful existence of Israel. It's supposed to be a bludgeoning bat that you beat Arabs with.
Air defense systems have apparently intercepted a number of rockets and drones. The strikes said to have come from the Golan Heights, which are controlled by Israel. Meanwhile, at the UN General Assembly, Syria's top diplomat has accused Western powers of facilitating Israeli war crimes against civilians.
The true intentions of the collective West have been revealed. The Israeli occupation, ongoing since 1967, their genocide and crimes against humanity are a vivid example of the collapse of the UN and the Security Council, which cannot stop the racist occupation and ongoing aggression. The United States did not allow the Security Council to fulfill its duties to counter global threats to humanity and global security. Since October 7th, the Israeli occupation has ramped up its deadly terrorist crimes. Israel must be held accountable for the war crimes it has been committing. The overt Israeli aggression has spread to brotherly Lebanon. They attacked Beirut, inflicting damage on the civilian population. The occupation forces have committed a cowardly act, using tons of explosives to kill the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah. Israel is pushing the region towards a dangerous escalation. Its consequences are unpredictable and may have a detrimental effect on the entire world.
Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has accused the West of failing to keep its promise to bring about a ceasefire in Lebanon and in Gaza. This was on the condition that Tehran renounces a military response towards Israel over the killing of the Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh. Now, he was assassinated by an explosive device that was planted in the guest house that he was staying in Tehran.
The claims of the leaders of the United States and European countries.
How much more are we going to go on here, Scott?
In exchange for Iran,
We'll finish right after this. I was trying to get the U.S. Secretary of State.
Completely false, and giving such criminals a chance will only encourage them to commit more crimes.
Well, Professor of Political Communication.
On a single person. People are equal human beings to draw away truth.
Yeah, I've had enough of him. Okay. I was trying to get the State Department spokesman, that little queer with the perfect hair, and his double talk, but it's more of an annoyance like a fly than any clarity. Michael, I'll hand it to you. So we have the invasion of Lebanon by the Israeli forces. We've got an attack against Syria by Israel, 3 people killed there. We've got attacks in Iraq as well. I'll hand it to you to get your assessment of how the next Act 2 is going to unfold. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, let's start at the beginning. Let's go back to October 7th, whenever Israel used that as the excuse to begin their war of aggression against the Palestinians and Hamas in Gaza. Israel may have left. The analogy I'll give is, imagine you're driving a high-end Porsche 911, and you drive it downtown Compton, LA, and you leave the keys in it and the window's down. It's going to get stolen. It's just not going to be there when you come back 5 minutes later. It'll be gone. That's essentially what Israel did on October 7th, is they set up an attractive nuisance with that concert, whatever it was, there right next to Gaza, in order to incite something, and then they did nothing to defend it. You use the car analogy. They didn't lock the doors. They left the keys in it. They did everything they could do to enable the perpetrators to do what they did. That's what Israel did. They didn't use October 7th. It wasn't an attack. It was an excuse to begin their war against Gaza. And they've been waging that war ever since. And they've been killing, tens of thousands of Palestinians. Now they don't have an excuse to do anything against Hezbollah. They don't have a good reason. Hezbollah's done nothing. Lebanon's done nothing. Syria's done nothing. But we're seeing now the open aggression of the Israelis against their neighbors. And my biggest fear is that Israel's going to go into Lebanon, get bogged down. A lot of Israelis will be killed, and they're going to suck the U.S. into sending our young men and women into harm's way. I don't want to see that. I wouldn't, spend a single American life to defend Israel. I mean, not a single one. I wouldn't give them a dime either, but that's just me. But this has been going on now for 75 years, since 1947, when Israel became a state. It was going on before then. They were displacing people, they were assassinating people, murdering people in order to create this artificial state of Israel that, by all rights, shouldn't exist. You have the Khazarians, who are actually in Judea killing the Semites. And they're the worst anti-Semites in the world. Or these Israeli Khazarians. This is them. But here we are today. I've been to Lebanon several times. One thing that you will notice when you drive down the streets in Lebanon is you will go for miles, and on the side of the road, on both sides, they've got those. You've seen these tank traps that are made out of like railroad rails. The steel rails that the train wheels actually go on. They're about half the length of a regular rail, and they're done in a tripod. And these are tank traps to stop their tanks. There are miles and miles and miles of these on every paved road anywhere you drive in Lebanon. So they showed the photograph of the 20 or 30 Israeli tanks getting ready to move in. They're going to have a hard time doing that in Beirut. Because they're going to be slowed down by these tank traps. I'm sorry, there's no easy way over them. There just isn't. Other areas in the Bekaa Valley and other areas outside of Beirut, it's wide open spaces. They'll make good progress with tanks. But in Beirut itself, they're going to have a really, really hard time. Now, the Lebanese people are very prepared for this. They've been invaded by Israel. This is, the third, fourth time now of an invasion by Israel. The last time they were there in 2003, Israel got their ass handed to them. They were driven home. They had extremely high casualties. They were very, very unhappy about it. But every building you're going to be in when you're in Lebanon will have on its roof a water tank, probably 5,000 gallon water tank. They will also have a generator or 2 or 3 generators. And they also have diesel fuel tanks up there to have fuel for these generators, because they know their water is going to be cut off. They know their power is going to go down, yet they still have to live. So they build these things into their buildings. It's great expense. They're unsightly, but it's what you do whenever you know you're going to be attacked. And I may have mentioned this before, but I was interrogated, questioned by Hezbollah when I was there in 2014 and again in 2015. And, they were very polite, and I took it sort of like a police interrogation. Some guy's walking down the road, the police pull him over and say, "Hey, sir, can you show us some ID? Who are you? What's your business here? What are you doing?" Except that this was in the accommodations I was at. They knocked on the door, asked to come in. They were very nice, very polite. But the questioning went on for several hours. But it was a give and take. And how Hezbollah looks at itself. The U.S. State Department has labeled them a terrorist organization because the Israel lobby wants them to be labeled as a terrorist organization. The Hezbollah themselves look at themselves as a militia, that they're here to defend their homes, their women, their children, their families, their friends from Israeli aggression. Hezbollah and Lebanon has never invaded Israel. They've never, they fight when they're attacked, but they don't go looking for trouble. And so Israel doesn't have an excuse. We're seeing naked aggression. We're seeing another genocide starting against the Arabic Semitic people of Gaza and of Lebanon by these non-Semitic Ashkenazi Khazar Israelis. That's what we're seeing. And it's time that the U.S. Pulls its head out of its ass. I mean, it's not going to see. Here's what people need to understand. I used to support Israel. I had a warm spot in my heart for, oh, they're the only democracy in the Middle East, and they're so much like us, and we really need to support them. But as a function of time, and I look at their behavior, and I look at how they treat other people, what they actually do. It's as the Bible says, by their fruits you shall know them.
Mm-hmm.
And these are not our friends. These are not our allies. These are the most vicious, bloodthirsty vermin on the earth. And they truly are the enemy of all mankind. That's what they are. And it's time that people started looking at their actions. By their deeds you shall know them. I mean, and that's really what moved me from being neutral pro Israel. I was never a strong fan, but neutral pro, I'd support him. Yeah, well, okay, if that's the right thing to do, let's do it. But it's turned me to being vehemently against them because I see them for what they are. I mean, these are evil people. I mean, the lack of kindness, the lack of compassion, the lack of any human emotions for their fellow man. I mean, anybody who can stand up on a building for 500 yards, shoot a pregnant woman and the 3-year-old child she's walking next to next to herself, and be happy about it, do a little happy dance that they do when they kill these Palestinians. I mean, these are not good people. These are this evil. I mean, the one announcer on the RT broadcast mentioned they're using white phosphorus. They've been using white phosphorus for decades. And it's time that the entire world realizes that Israel is a criminal outlaw state, and there is no place for them among civilized people of any race, of any religion, of any type. There is no place for them. That they are savages. They are beasts. They are monsters. And it's time that we started treating them accordingly. And what do you do to a rabid dog? You shoot it in the head. And Israel is a rabid dog. And I am ashamed and embarrassed that our country supports this rabid dog, that our politicians are so weak and lame and so cowardly that they take the bribe, that they give in to the blackmail, that they endure the extortion and do whatever it is Israel tells them to do. And enough of this is enough. But the United States is clearly on the wrong side of history. And, but before we started, I mentioned to you that, when I was a kid, the Soviet Union was the global villain. That's what we saw. They were doing these aggressions in Korea and Vietnam, trying to expand communism and all this kind of stuff. And I thought that, they're the bad guys, we were the good guys. We look at the propaganda from World War II and how we won World War II. Without us, there wouldn't have been a great victory. We wouldn't have defeated those evil Nazis. And, it's all untrue. Everything about it is untrue. And it turns out in this day and age, in today's time, Israel and the United States, we are its vassal state. We are its muscle, if you will. We are the global villain. We are the ones who are doing bad things to other people in the world. We're the ones who killed 1 million Iraqis who had nothing to do with 9/11. We're the ones who invaded Afghanistan and occupied it for 20 years, who had nothing to do with 9/11. We're the bad guys. And you go biblical on this, and you read about Armageddon and the end of days, and how the great powers are going to fight, and good is going to face evil. I always thought that my country, the United States, was on the side of good, and we're not. We are on the side of evil. We are doing it, and guys like you and I, we're watching our country be destroyed from within by these Jew termites who've come in and undermined all of our institutions, and they're turning us into a country. They offshored our manufacturing to China and Mexico. And the reason we won World War II is because our manufacturing was intact, and that's why we became so financially strong. Well, they gutted our country, with this just-in-time supply chain management and cheaper cost of labor and all these things overseas. We forgot to protect our strategic interests, and that is our ability to manufacture. And if this develops into a greater war, Iran's going to go into it. If Iran goes in, Russia is going to go into it. North Korea is going to go into it. China is probably going to go into it because they see the danger to them as well. That the United States is a threat to every independent sovereign country out there, and it's got to be stopped. And if that happens, the United States today does not have the ability to wage a war for more than 6 months. If we've learned anything from Ukraine, the lesson of Ukraine is that I'll give the example of artillery shells. We can make 3 million a year is what we can make. In peacetime, 3 million artillery shells is plenty. But in wartime, you need to make 3 million a month. And we don't have that bandwidth. We don't have that ability. They just had that little dog and pony photo op in Pennsylvania where Zelensky was there at the 155 howitzer ammo manufacturing plant, and that clown Shapiro signed the shell for the howitzer. I mean, that is the last thing I want my name on, is an instrument of death that's going to kill innocent men, women, and children, or even other troops in the field. I don't want my name on that. I'm sorry. I'm too modest to do that. I don't have that kind of arrogance. But if we've learned anything, the Russians ramped up quickly. They're producing. They increase their production of 155 artillery shells. 500% overnight, and the U.S. is still lagging, and Ukraine still doesn't have what they need in artillery shells. If we learned one thing out of that, is that the U.S. doesn't have enough manufacturing base in our country to fight a war to win it. If we don't win in 3 to 6 months, we're done, because the war of attrition, we will run out of war material. We will run out of components to create the electronics that all of our modern weaponry works on. We won't be able to build new F-135s. We won't be able to build new missiles. Won't be able to build new smart bombs, because we will be cut off of our supply of semiconductors, because we do not make them in this country anymore. Particularly discrete semiconductors, the single transistor ones, the single diode ones. We don't have that ability. They're all made offshore, and we will fail on the battlefield because we will run out of munitions to use. I mean, let me give everybody out there an example. The Patriot movement, we were all in scramble mode to buy ammo. And you know what? There wasn't enough ammo to meet the domestic need. So, I mean, we're talking, 5.56, 7.62 NATO rounds, even 22, 45, 9mm. You couldn't buy 9mm to save your life 2-3 years ago. And if you did, you were paying $1.25 a round for it, which is way out of sight. But you look at that, we couldn't even supply our own domestic civilian need for small arms ammo. And we're going to go get in a shooting war with other forces across the world. We're going to let Israel drag us into a situation like that. These people are out of their minds. They have really, really overestimated the abilities of what the United States has. I mean, we may spend $875 billion a year on defense, but most of that is being siphoned off and ending up in shareholders and politicians and lobbyists' pockets. And a fraction of it actually goes into buying the ordnance and the fighting platforms that the military needs. And our military, we don't even pay them well. They're on food stamps, for Christ's sakes. Our enlisted men are living on food stamps, and that's with base housing. Where this money is going is beyond me, but it's not going into the military and the Department of Defense, and they refuse audits. And so, let's do the math, folks. Can a thoroughly corrupted, broken, inefficient machine take on the rest of the world? I don't think so. I don't think we have it in us. I don't think that we're there. I mean, we do good against less than opponents, but having a peer-to-peer contest like China or Russia, those are peers. Going into Iraq, was one thing. Going into Afghanistan was another. Sure, we could go in and we could do a lot of damage, but still we couldn't win. We didn't win either of those conflicts. We didn't win in Vietnam. We didn't win in Korea. Our military has forgotten how to win wars, and we do not have the infrastructure, and we do not have the culture within our Department of Defense to put together an organization that is capable of doing such things. We have lost it. We don't have it. We've what's the old saying? Hard times make good men. Good times make men soft. And we've had too many good times, and we are a weak power, and we are losing our global position because of it.
Mm-hmm. What's seeming, what I sense is the men in Washington, D.C. are full of parade pageantry soldiering. They're not real soldiers, who've been in the grit and the fight and, got gunpowder burns and blood, spattered on their faces. They're in polished uniforms with polished chrome, dulled bayonets and fancy chiffons and all the polished boots, and they love to march down the July 4th parades and Veterans Day, Memorial Day. They love the pageantry of the U.S. military, and these people in Congress and these people in the military ranks who represent that are it's like they don't want to wake. It's like they're the classic scene from the book of Ulysses, where his men don't want to stop eating the purple lotus flowers of dreams, of deception. And they do not want to wake up to the reality that, as you laid out, America is not what it was, which McGregor has confirmed too, 30 years ago. It's not 1990. It is 2024 with an emasculated rainbow flag, homosexual, transgender-friendly military rotting from inside that has depleted its ranks and depleted its munitions against Russia and Ukraine. And now, through the maniacy of Netanyahu and the Israelis, is infuriating every Muslim country on the face of the planet. Nasrallah, who they've just assassinated, the Iranians, the Shia, directly connect him to Muhammad. You're seeing these Turkey, Jordan, Syria, Iran. I wouldn't be surprised if the vast majority of these Muslim countries, all including Saudi Arabia, they all unite against the West, unite on the side of BRICS, and you've got 4/5 of the world on an antagonistic side against the United States, which would translate into, hey, if you want to stop these wars, stop using the U.S. dollar. And then what does the U.S. have besides Germany, France, and Britain, which are a bunch of yapping Chihuahua dogs without any teeth? There's nothing there. We have nothing. And then we're also being invaded across the southern border for all kinds of internal collapse. So do you see the Congress and the presidency, whether it's Trump, and I don't think it'll be Kamala Harris, but I do think there's a danger of them assassinating Trump and plunging the country into chaos. But do you see a similar Zelensky emergency rule where they go around with white trucks and try and throw American kids into some sort of draft situation? Do you see it getting that bad because they're unable to relinquish the fantasy that America is got to be the ruler of the world, and if you're not joining the fight, you're a traitor? Do you see that unfolding in a potential civil war explosion? Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I do. I see them reintroducing conscription. And like I said, I've got other emotions about that. I think conscription is a good thing in the right circumstances, but I don't see it as a good thing in this circumstance. And the other thing that people need to understand is that in 1973, when they ended conscription before, it was a different America.
Yeah.
These kids today, the obesity problems they have, the drug problems, the intellectual deficiencies they have from like I tease and say that my cell phone caused me into digital dementia, because I used to know everybody's phone number by heart. You could memorize it and just dial it anyway there. But now I don't remember anybody's phone number, because I just hit their name and it dials itself. I mean, same thing with maps and things and driving cars around. It's a
Good
handy
point.
tool, but it causes digital dementia. Now, these kids have never ever had these abilities that I used to have.
Mhm.
You get somebody's phone number, I know it. I can go ahead and dial it. But they never had that. They don't have these abilities, and they're just deficient. They're weak. They're soft. These are the kids who all got participation trophies, who never had to struggle, who the sense of being the best and being merit was put down. That the standards they were on, they're not going to be the conscripted fighting force that we had during the Vietnam era, when we had kids off America. They turned out pretty tough. They made pretty good soldiers, not great soldiers, pretty good soldiers. Conscripts are never as good as soldiers as a professional soldier will be. It's not just how the system is. But we've got, like I said, so many other problems here. And your analogy that we've got a parade military, I think that's a good analogy. They shine their boots, they have creases in their pants, and boy, they sure look sharp when they march in formation. They really do. There's nothing like it. It is inspiring. It does, it gives you a good feeling.
They're like Shirley Temple and Wee Willy Wonka or whatever. Wee
But,
Willy with the old black and white.
that's not a combat situation.
Yeah.
And we've outsourced our ability on logistics. We don't have those capabilities internal to the U.S. Military anymore. I mean, we don't have the cargo ships. We don't have the cargo airplanes. I mean, in Iraq, for instance, Kellogg, Brown, and Root was over there providing everything from your meals in the mess hall to your had their logo on the porta potty that's out back. Those blue ones. Everything said Kellogg, Brown, and Root. It was all supplied by them. They outsourced all the military functions, and they've not brought them back in. We don't have that ability in internal to the Department of Defense any longer. It has been outsourced. And I know Dick Cheney and Halliburton all made a lot of money providing these services, but it damaged the United States in our strategic defensibility of our own country and our own interest. And so we have been hollowed out and weakened from the inside. These are systemic problems that need to be addressed. And if Trump would get elected, one of the things that he must do is rebuild the military. I don't mean just throw more money at them. I mean go in and look at every weapon system and every process and every procedure, and find out which ones strengthen the United States and which ones weaken us, and find ways to cut the cost down. One thing I admire about the Russians is their budget is about 10-15% per year of what the U.S. Defense spending budget is. But yet their platforms are more combat effective than anything the U.S. puts up, anything, and they're just amazing. But they don't have publicly traded for-profit companies who are building, profit revenue streams into the systems they design. I'll use the F-35 again because I use it often. But on your phone, how occasionally it'll just stop and say, restart your phone, it needs to update. The F-35 has got the same set of problems. It has to re-update because it's so software dependent. They've gotten away from being a robust hardware platforms into being software platforms. And that is a real problem. But, for, I think it's Northrop Grumman who makes that, the F-35, they built that into their business plan that every 6 months they're going to have a software update. The U.S. Department of Defense has to buy it. They have to pay it, and if you don't pay it, you've got worthless metal sitting out there.
Wow!
And this is not how to defend a country. This is not what it takes. We need to have a new vision on what our military is, what its jobs are, what its functions are. And Scott, you and I talked about this a couple months back. Is we can't afford, a $1 trillion defense budget. We just can't afford it. How can we defend the country and do the job of the military as constitutionally required on a 200 or $400 billion a year budget? Cut it in half. Maybe make it $450 billion a year. How can we defend the country effectively, do everything that the Constitution demands on 50 cents on the dollar worth of spending today? I'll guarantee you I could get it done. I will guarantee you I could. I would have people trying to assassinate me because I'm going to cost them their fortunes, but that's okay. The country is more important than my little scrawny life here, my little puny life. But we can do these things. I say it often. We have no problems we can't fix. Just that the people who want to stop us from fixing them control the money, and they control our politicians, and so nothing gets done. There's too many special interests out there who are guarding their piece of the pie to allow any meaningful reform to happen, and that's what Trump's going to run into. I mean, we're going to, short of a systemic collapse across the whole country where things are really bad, there is going to be no reform. There's going to be a lot of talk of it, but everything is going to get bogged down in committee, as Congress is so good at doing.
Well, let me ask you something too on the technology side in our last closing few minutes. The pagers and the walkie-talkies that exploded. Do you see a similar strike occurring within the United States where these cell phones and other technology will be targeted in America to blow up in American people's hands, pockets, cars, etc.?
Let me give you a worst case scenario. First of all, in your neighborhood, well, not yours, way south of you, but south of LA, north of Laguna Niguel, a couple days ago, a semi-truck was stuck on a bridge carrying a load of lithium-ion batteries that exploded and went and burst on fire, and they couldn't put it out. And I haven't followed up to see if it's still burning or not. But these lithium-ion batteries are essentially, as you said the other day, a hand grenade in your pocket. And remember when those, what they called hoverboards, came out for kids, and they were under the Christmas trees, and they'd plug them in to be charged for the kid, and it would blow up in the middle of the night and burn the house down. They still have all those same issues and same problems. They've mitigated them, and they manage them so it happens less, but it still happens on its own, by itself. Now, what Israel has done is they've created a set of software tools that they can excite whatever it is in the cell phone, the pager, the walkie-talkie, the car, your laptop computer, anything that's got a lithium-ion battery, to where they can exercise via software to create that same type of explosion and fire. Mm-hmm. And so, could it be done? Yes, it could. Now, here's where it gets scary. Everybody's got all these Facebook posts out there, and they put up this meme or that meme, and it's critical of the government, it's critical of Israel, it's critical of this or that or the other thing. So people have identified what side of the contention they are on. So the people who are what we call patriots and support the Constitution have identified themselves for the most part. Now, does your Facebook have a connection to your IP address on your computer for your MAC address on your cell phone? You bet it does. They've got it. They know how to get to you specifically as an individual if you do something or say something that offends them greatly. Could they do a mass casualty event like they did in Lebanon? That was, 4,000 people? Could they do 1 million? Could they do 10 million? Could they do 30 million people at a time? I have to tell you it's possible. I have to say it is conceptually possible. And if I can say that, I can guarantee you they've got smart guys working in the back room someplace trying to figure out how to do it last year. Not now. They knew how to do this a year ago. So we all have to take a look at the electronics in our life. I've always been a laptop guy because I traveled a lot. I was always, traveling the world. And I may go to a desktop here pretty quick because it doesn't have a lithium-ion battery. And I may get rid of this stupid cell phone and just put a landline in and put an old-fashioned recorder on it. Say, you know, I'll return your call when I get to it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need this thing. I need to throw off my disability of digital dementia and start memorizing phone numbers again and following maps. And you know, I mean, it can be done. I've done it in the past. Anybody can do it. You just have to know. You just have to want to try.
That's where the value, the advantage of the earlier generations from the 50s and the 60s, 70s, and 80s have a enormous advantage over anything young adults today. We had, growing up, a greater character development than anything that America has now. And that, I do believe, that generation of Generation X and older are going to be the inheritors and the preservers and the defenders of the nation, while everyone else folds into a fetus position and sucks their thumb, wrapped in a rainbow flag, and talking to their cell phone, which is now a blank screen, where Facebook and Instagram and Twitter have and TikTok have gone deathly silent. Mike Harris, it's good to have you with us. Thank you so much. Go ahead, final thoughts. Go ahead real quick.
30 seconds for closing. One of the things that separates my generation from the current generations, when I was a kid, it was safe to go outside and play. You could go outside and play. You could go in the field. You could go down the creek. You'd go here. You go there. Go anywhere you wanted. You know, just be home by dark. Be home by dinner.
Yeah.
Today, kids can't do that because we don't enforce criminal penalties against those who hurt children. And Scott, next week, let's take some time and put together a segment on crime and punishment and what we can do differently, because what we're doing now doesn't work. I mean, we've all read the newspaper. Well, that illegal alien was deported 9 times, and yet he came back again and raped and killed an 11-year-old girl. We, as the American people, need to put an end to that. Yes. And it's up to us to put an end to it. I want to talk some strategies about how that can be done, how it can be implemented.
Very good. Looking forward to it. Mike Harris, once again, a great
conversation.
We will see you next week. God bless you. Good night.